Flick to link. Link to flick.
We're going to share a lot of secrets today, you and I. And in doing so, I hope that we can lift some of the shame many of us feel about sex. How many here have ever been catcalled by a stranger? Lots of women. For me, the time I remember best is when that stranger was a student of mine. He came up to me after class that night, and his words confirmed what I already knew. "I'm so sorry, Professor. If I had known it was you, I would never have said those things." I wasn't a person to him until I was his professor. This concept, called objectification, is the foundation of sexism, and we see it reinforced through every aspect of our lives. We see it in the government that refuses to punish men for raping women. We see it in advertisements. How many of you have seen an advertisement that uses a woman's breast to sell an entirely unrelated product? Or movie after movie after movie that portrays women as only love interests. These examples might seem inconsequential and harmless, but they're insidious, slowly building into a culture that refuses to see women as people. We see this in the school that sends home a 10-year-old girl because her clothes were a distraction to boys trying to learn. Or the government that refuses to punish men for raping women over and over. Or the woman who is killed because she asked a man to stop grinding on her on the dance floor. Media plays a large role in perpetuating the objectification of women. Let's consider the classic romantic comedy. We're typically introduced to two kinds of women in these movies. Two kinds of desirable women, anyway. The first is the sexy bombshell. This is the unbelievably gorgeous woman with the perfect body. Our leading man has no trouble identifying her and even less trouble having sex with her. The second is our leading lady, the beautiful but demure woman our leading man falls in love with, despite not noticing her at first or not liking her if he did. The first is the slut. She is to be consumed and forgotten. She's much too available. The second is desirable, but modest, and therefore worthy of our leading man's future babies. Marriage material. We're actually told that women have two roles, but these two roles have a difficult time existing within the same woman. On the rare occasion that I share with a new acquaintance that I study sex, if they don't end the conversation right then, they're usually pretty intrigued. "Oh, tell me more." "So I do. I'm really interested in studying the sexual behaviors of pregnant and postpartum couples." At this point, I get a different kind of response. "Oh, huh. Do pregnant people even have sex? Have you thought about studying sexual desire or orgasms? That would be interesting and sexy. Tell me, what are the first words that come to mind when you picture a pregnant woman?" I asked this question in a survey of over 500 adults, and most responded with belly or round and cute. This didn't surprise me too much. What else do we label as cute? Babies, puppies, kittens, the elderly, right? When we label an adult as cute, though, we take away a lot of their intelligence, their complexity. We reduce them to childlike qualities. I also asked heterosexual men to imagine a woman that they're partnered with is pregnant, and then asked women to imagine that they are pregnant, and then tell me the first words that come to mind when they imagine having sex. Most of the responses were negative. Gross, awkward, not sexy, odd, uncomfortable. How? not worth the trouble, not worth the risk. That last one really stuck with me. We might think that because we divorce pregnant women and moms from sexuality, we're removing the constraints of sexual objectification. They experience less sexism, right? Not exactly. What happens instead is a different kind of objectification. In my efforts to explain this to others, one conversation led to the Venus of Willendorf, a Paleolithic figurine scholars assumed was a goddess of love and beauty, hence the name Venus. This theory was later revised, though, when scholars noted the sculptor's obvious focus on the figurine's reproductive features. Large breasts, considered ideal for nursing, a round, possibly pregnant belly, the remnants of red dye alluding to menstruation or birth. They also assumed that she was meant to be held or placed lying down because her tiny feet don't allow her to be freestanding. She also had no face. For this reason, it was assumed that she was a representation of fertility and not a portrait of a person. She was an object. In the history of her interpretation, she went from object of ideal beauty and love to object of reproduction. I think this transition speaks more about the scholars who have interpreted her purpose than the actual purpose of the figurine herself. When a woman becomes pregnant, she leaves the realm of men's sexual desire and slides into her reproductive and child-rearing role. In doing so, she also becomes the property of the community, considered very important, but only because she's pregnant, right? I've taken to calling this the Willendorf effect, and once again, we see it reinforced in many aspects of her life. Has anyone here ever been visibly pregnant? Yeah, that's me, right? So how many of you ever had a stranger touch your belly during pregnancy? Maybe without even asking your permission first? Or told what you can and cannot eat by somebody who's not your doctor, your medical care provider? Or asked private questions about your birth plan and then told why those choices are all wrong? Yeah, me too. Or had a server refuse to bring you a glass of wine? This one might give you a pause, I know, but stay with me. This is a huge secret. It is actually safe to drink in moderation during pregnancy. Many of us don't know this because doctors don't trust pregnant women with this secret. Especially if she's less educated or a woman of color. What this tells us is this Willendorf effect, it's also classist and racist. It's present when the government reminds women with every new anti-choice bill that the contents of her uterus are not her own. Or when an OBGYN says, while it's safe to have sex during pregnancy, sometimes you never know. Better safe than sorry, right? She's denied basic privacy and bodily autonomy under the guise of be a good mother. We don't trust her to make her own decisions. She's cute, remember? When we tell women that when we tell women that sex isn't worth the risk during pregnancy, what we're telling her is that her sexual pleasure doesn't matter. So what we are telling her is that she, in fact, doesn't matter, even though the needs of her fetus are not at odds with her own needs. So medical providers, such as the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, have the opportunity to educate about the safety of sex during pregnancy. So what do the experts say? ACOG actually has no public official statement about the safety of sex during pregnancy. Guidance from the Mayo Clinic is generally positive, but presented with a caveat. Although most women can safely have sex throughout pregnancy, sometimes it's best to be cautious. Some women don't.
Flick to link, a link to flick. My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best.
I'm Adam Novice. Spotlight uses a special English method of broadcasting. It is easier for people to understand, no matter where in the world they live. English expression crackpot? It is not a nice expression. It means that a person is a little insane. No one knows exactly where the expression comes from, but the meaning is clear. A crack is a small break. A cracked pot is a container that is just a little broken. So, when someone uses the expression crackpot, he means that the person's mind is a little bit broken. It is an insult. But a cracked container is not broken completely. Some cracked pots also have their uses. Christy Van Aragon tells us a story about cracked pots.
The hot sun beat down on Sukanda's back. He bent down on his knees by the cool lake. He lifted the water to his hand. He drank a little. It tasted wonderful on a hot day like this. But it was time to do his work. With great care, Sukanda filled his 2 pots with water. He hung one on each end of a long stick. He put the stick across his neck, and he stood up. He was ready for his long trip. Each day, Sukanda carried the water to his master's house. The water pots were almost exactly the same. One pot was perfect. It held the water all the way to the master's house. But the other pot had a crack in it. On the trip, water slowly spilled from the cracked pot. So when it arrived at the house, it was only half full. Sukanda walked from the lake to his master's house every day. It was a long and tiring trip, but he never missed a day. He was a good and hard worker. For 2 years, he delivered 1/2 pot of water and 1 full pot of water. The perfect pot was pleased with itself, but the cracked pot was ashamed. It became very unhappy. He wished he were a perfect pot. So after 2 years, he decided to speak to Sukanda.
I am ashamed. I want to apologize to you, Sukanda.
Sukanda replied,
Why are you ashamed?
For 2 years, I have only carried half of my water load. Water leaks out of the crack in my side, the master's house. My weakness means that you do not get the full value for your efforts.
Sukanda felt sad for the cracked pot, but he knew how to encourage the pot. He said,
On our trip tomorrow, I want you to look around you. I want you to see all the beautiful flowers that we pass.
So the next day, they made the same trip. And this time, the cracked pot looked up and around. It saw the wildflowers on the side of the path. It was true, they did pass many beautiful flowers. The cracked pot looked at the different colors: red, yellow, orange, purple. Nature was beautiful. And so the cracked pot cheered a little. But when they reached the master's house, he became sad again. As usual, he had spilled half of his load. So he apologized again to Sukanda. Sukanda said to the cracked pot,
Did you see the beautiful flowers along the way? Did you see that the flowers are only on your side of the path? They are not on the other pot's side. That is because I have always known about your weakness, your crack, and I used it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path. Every day we walked to the master's house, and along the way you gave the seeds water. The seeds have become beautiful flowers. These flowers make me very happy. I have gathered these beautiful flowers, and I put them on my master's table. This beauty only fills his house because of the way you are. The story of Sukanda and the cracked pot is an invented story, but it has a deep and useful meaning. The idea of the story is, each of us has our own individual failings. In one way or another, we are all cracked pots. We may only see our failings as weaknesses, but sometimes our weaknesses can have strong results. Mary Desayan is a therapist. She listens to people's problems, and she helps people find solutions to these problems. In particular, she helps people recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. Mary is also a storyteller. She believes that stories can help people understand themselves better. She uses the cracked pot story in her therapy. She wrote about the story for the website Healing Stories.
Story is a natural tool to use in addiction treatment. It offers a safe way to examine some very difficult issues. These can be frightening or shameful for a person to admit. There are many issues and many stories. This story works well in recovery. In these situations, people concentrate on their weaknesses and failings. This is good because it helps people understand themselves and make good changes. However, sometimes people just concentrate on their weaknesses. The cracked pot helps people remember that even these weaknesses have a purpose. As a therapist, I believe the problems in our lives and our weaknesses are also some of our best teachers.
You may remember our program about Johnny Erickson Tata. At a young age, Johnny had a terrible diving accident. She broke a bone in her neck. As a result, she cannot move or feel anything below her shoulders. Johnny was a Christian. She prayed for God to heal her body. But instead, he healed her in a different way. He healed her spirit. She found a new purpose in her life. God used her weakness to help and encourage other people. Today, Johnny is a painter, speaker, and writer. Her organization also helps people all over the world with physical problems. Johnny has written many books about pain and suffering. She has spoken on the radio and television. Johnny often remembers these words of Paul found in the Bible.
My grace is enough for you. My power is made perfect in weakness.
Johnny believes that these words can be true for all people, no matter what their weaknesses are. You can read more about Johnny Erickson Tata on our website. Her story shows that having cracks or weaknesses does not mean failure. In fact,